Ferrari have a real problem because Lewis Hamilton suddenly looks at home in the SF26 while Charles Leclerc is the one asking the harder questions. 2 race weekends into this new era, Hamilton already has a Ferrari Grand Prix podium, Leclerc is only 1 point ahead inside the team, and the feeling around Maranello has changed fast. This is not the same story people were telling a few months ago. Hamilton was supposed to be adapting, Leclerc was supposed to be in control, and Ferrari were supposed to know exactly where their future sat. But here is what the paddock is not talking about. This car may already be pulling that picture apart. The early numbers are sharp enough to make this impossible to ignore. Mercedes lead the Constructors' Championship with 98 points. Ferrari are second on 67. Leclerc has 34. Hamilton has 33. And that tiny gap inside the garage matters more than it looks because Hamilton also beat Leclerc in China, qualifying by just 0.013 seconds before taking Ferrari's first Grand Prix podium of the season. That was not noise. That was a signal. At the same time, the FIA has already stepped in for Japan and cut the maximum qualifying recharge from 9 megajoules to 8, which tells you these new cars are still exposing things teams are only starting to understand. That is why this story feels bigger than one good weekend or one bad session. Hamilton has said he feels back to his best physically and mentally. Ferrari have clearly given him a car that finally makes sense, and Leclerc is now trying to master a machine that may not reward his strongest habits in the same way. What no broadcast covered is this. Ferrari do not just need speed now, they need answers before this turns into a pattern the whole season starts to follow. And to understand why that gap is opening, you have to look at what these 2026 cars really reward. Mercedes have already turned Ferrari's bright start into something far less comfortable. That is the first thing that matters here. Ferrari can celebrate a podium, they can point to flashes of pace, and they can tell themselves the gap is still small inside the garage, but the championship table is already exposing the pressure around this team. George Russell and Kimi Antonelli are not waiting for Ferrari to sort out its internal balance. They are cashing points right now, and that changes the whole mood around Hamilton and Leclerc, because this is not just a fight to be the faster Ferrari driver anymore. It is a fight to stop Mercedes from building a lead that starts to look dangerous. The numbers hit hard when you line them up properly. Russell leads the championship on 51 points. Antonelli sits on 47. Mercedes have 98 in the constructors table, and Ferrari are already chasing on 67. Australia gave Mercedes a 1-2 with Leclerc third and Hamilton 4th, then China gave Russell the sprint win before Antonelli took the Grand Prix, and Hamilton grabbed 3rd after qualifying ahead of Leclerc by just 0.013 seconds. That is not a random mix of weekends. That is a pattern with a shape to it. Ferrari are close enough to stay in the frame, but not clean enough yet to control where this season is really going. That is why the battle inside Ferrari matters so much more than usual. When a team is clearly the class of the field, us teammates can afford a slow burn. Ferrari do not have that luxury. Every point Hamilton takes from Leclerc or Leclerc takes from Hamilton could also be a point Ferrari needed against Mercedes. And every clean answer one driver gives the engineers matters if this title race starts getting away from them before Europe really settles in. The real story was never about the lap time. It was about which driver is reading these new cars more clearly while the championship is still small enough to save, and that means the next part of this story starts with what these 2026 machines actually reward. The 2026 cars are not asking the drivers the same question the old cars asked. They are asking who can stay calm while the car keeps changing shape and power delivery through the lap. Straight mode opens the car up on the straights, and corner mode brings the grip back for the turns, and the whole balance of the lap now depends on how cleanly a driver moves between those moments. Ferrari did not walk into a normal regulation change here. These cars are smaller, lighter, lower on drag, lower on downforce, and far more demanding when it comes to timing, rhythm, and control. The power unit shift makes that even tougher. The MGU-H is gone. The MGU-K has jumped from 120 kilowatts to 350. And Formula 1 says the target is now roughly a 50% split between combustion power and electric power. That changes the whole feel of a lap. Drivers are harvesting more under braking, while lifting, and even in certain full throttle moments, which means the fastest lap is no longer just about who attacks the hardest. The data tells a completely different story. The driver who keeps the car settled and the energy flow tidy can protect more speed for the part of the lap that really decides the result. That is where this starts cutting into driver identity. Some drivers build lap time by forcing the car right onto the edge and living there. Others shape the lap more smoothly, keeping the platform calm and feeding the power in with less drama. Under these rules, that difference matters more than before because the car is now reacting to every input through the wings, the battery, and the power delivery all at once. So this is no longer only about talent, it is about which style gets paid back by the new era. And that is exactly where Ferrari's problem with Leclerc begins to come into focus. Charles Leclerc is not being beaten by a lack of speed. He is being squeezed by a Ferrari that punishes even small imperfections much harder than people think. That is the uncomfortable part of this story. From the outside, Ferrari still look close enough to stay in the fight. From inside the cockpit, Leclerc is saying something much harsher. He has already admitted that the SF26 gives away a lot of lap time the moment the car drops even a little outside its ideal state, and that matters more for him because his best laps usually come when he is dancing right on the edge of control rather than driving with a margin built in. The evidence from the first 2 rounds backs that up. In Australia, Leclerc said Ferrari were nowhere near Mercedes after ending qualifying about 8/10 off George Russell's pole time. And he also pointed to deployment trouble in Q2 before saying these new cars are so complex that nobody is extracting everything cleanly yet. By Japan Week, his tone had shifted from surprise to realism. He said Ferrari's only real chance is to bother Mercedes in the opening laps, because once they get free air, the gap opens again, and he put that deficit at 4 or 5 tenths across the first 2 races. That is what makes his situation so dangerous without turning it into panic. Leclerc can still hit hard early, still place the car where others will not, and still keep Ferrari in the fight when the race is compact. But over a full lap and over a full weekend, a narrow operating window turns aggression into attacks if the platform underneath him is not giving enough back. So before this becomes a simple Hamilton versus Leclerc argument, there is a more important step to take, because the next part is understanding why Hamilton suddenly looks so much more comfortable inside the exact same machine. Lewis Hamilton does not look like a driver surviving on reputation anymore. He looks like a driver who knows exactly what the car wants from him. That is a very different thing. The change is not only visible in the results sheet, it is visible in the way he is carrying himself through the weekend. The panic has gone. The hesitation has gone. The sense of fighting the Ferrari every time he turns in has gone. Hamilton himself has said he feels back to his best, physically and mentally, and after the first 2 rounds, that does not sound like confidence talk. It sounds like a driver who has finally found a car he can trust. China made that shift impossible to dismiss. Hamilton lined up 3rd, just 0.013 quicker than Leclerc in qualifying, then turned that into 3rd place in the Grand Prix for his first Ferrari podium on a Sunday. But the result was only half the message. After the race, he called it one of the most enjoyable races he had had in a long time, which tells you this was not only about points or damage limitation. Nobody in that garage expected what came next. For the first time since joining Ferrari, Hamilton did not look like he was managing discomfort. He looked like he was enjoying the fight inside the car itself. That is why this section matters so much. A driver can steal 1 lap on instinct or grab 1 result through timing, but comfort is harder to fake because it shows up in every phase of the weekend. From qualifying trim to race rhythm to the way a driver talks when the helmet comes off. Hamilton now sounds settled, and that changes Ferrari's internal balance even before the stopwatch does the rest. The danger for Ferrari is that a more comfortable Hamilton does not automatically mean a finished Leclerc. It means the next chapter gets more complicated because Leclerc is still close enough to make this a proper fight. Charles Leclerc is still close enough to turn this story on its head, and that is exactly why Ferrari cannot read too much into one strong Hamilton weekend. The easy version says Hamilton has settled in, and Leclerc is now chasing. The harder truth is that Leclerc has already shown he can hit back the moment Ferrari give him the right phase of the race. In Australia, he launched into the lead at the start and later finished 3rd, holding Hamilton off by just over half a second at the flag. That is not a driver fading into the background. That is a driver still shaping the fight whenever the car gives him the first opening. China told a similar story in a different way. Leclerc did not beat Hamilton on Sunday, but he still finished 2nd in the sprint behind George Russell and ahead of Hamilton, which matters because it shows his speed is still there when Ferrari find the right balance early in the weekend. again. He also remains ahead in the championship on 34 points to Hamilton's 33, and that 1 point keeps the internal picture far tighter than the headlines make it seem. And that is where this story gets complicated. Hamilton may look more settled right now, but Leclerc is still close enough that one regulatory shift, one setup breakthrough, or one better qualifying rhythm can swing the pressure straight back. That is the danger in calling this too early. Ferrari do not have one driver flying and one driver disappearing. They have two top drivers reading the same car in different ways, with one of them looking more natural today and the other still close enough to punish any wrong conclusion tomorrow. For Leclerc fans, that is the reason not to panic. For Hamilton fans, it is the reason this rise feels real, because it is happening against a teammate who is still fully alive in the fight. The next piece is the one that can tilt everything, because Japan arrives with a fresh rule tweak that could change how this balance behaves the moment the cars hit qualifying again. Suzuka has changed this story before qualifying has even started. The FIA has already stepped in and trimmed the maximum energy recharge for qualifying from 9 megajoules to 8 after talks with all 11 teams and the power unit makers, which means drivers should spend less time lifting and coasting and less time nursing the battery down the straight. That matters because Japan is no longer a simple replay of Australia or China. It is the first weekend where the rule set itself has moved in response to what the drivers felt in the opening rounds, and that gives Ferrari a fresh test at exactly the moment this fight inside the garage is getting serious. The wider picture only makes that pressure heavier. George Russell says Mercedes still have a small edge over Ferrari and a good one over the rest. Oh, but he is openly warning that things can change quickly once rivals bring more performance. Max Verstappen has gone even further, saying Red Bull are nowhere near the front right now, while Lando Norris is still convinced McLaren can get back to building the best car on the grid even after both McLarens failed to start in China because of separate technical issues. So Ferrari are not walking into Suzuka with one clean target. They are standing between the team already leading and the team still capable of swinging the season. That is why this weekend can tell Ferrari something China could not. If the reduced recharge changes the feel of the qualifying lap and Leclerc immediately looks freer, then the balance inside the SF26 may still be flexible enough to pull back toward him. But if Hamilton still looks calmer, still looks cleaner, and still ends up on the right side of the garage, then this stops looking like early adaptation and starts looking like design fit. Suzuka is not just another round now, it is the checkpoint that decides whether Ferrari have a close fight on their hands or a deeper truth to face, and that leads straight into the consequence Ferrari may not be ready for. Ferrari may not have meant to tilt this season toward one side of the garage, but the early evidence says the SF26 is giving Lewis Hamilton a cleaner path to performance than it is giving Charles Leclerc. That is the answer hiding underneath all the noise. Hamilton is 4th in the standings on 33 points. Leclerc is 3rd on 34. Ferrari sit on 67 in the Constructors' Championship, and yet the bigger pressure is that Mercedes already have 98 and are setting the pace for everyone. So this is not only an internal Ferrari story anymore, it is a design story, a title story, and a development story all at once. What makes that verdict hard to ignore is how cleanly the pieces now fit together. Hamilton says he feels back to his best physically and mentally. He has already taken Ferrari's first Grand Prix podium of the year in China, and he looks more settled each time the car asks for patience and precision. Leclerc, on the other hand, has openly said Ferrari are still around 4 or 5 tenths behind Mercedes, and that their best chance is often in the opening phase before the race stretches out. That does not mean Leclerc has lost anything. It means the car is currently paying Hamilton back more often for the way he is driving it. That is why Suzuka matters so much, and why this fight is nowhere near finished. The FIA has already changed the qualifying energy rules for Japan, which means Ferrari are about to find out whether this gap is something flexible or something deeper. If Leclerc feels freer straight away, then this story stays balanced and dangerous. If Hamilton still lands on the stronger side of the weekend, then Ferrari have a truth they cannot hide from as the season moves on. They may have built a fast car for both drivers, but right now it looks like the future is speaking more clearly to Hamilton than it is to Leclerc.